The legacy of the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s began due to the oppression of African Americans. Their goal was to equally receive the same citizenship given to white people. Advancements in this movement occurred due to the several acts that were passed in favor of African Americans. The legacy of the Civil Rights Movement came from the many cases addressed in the court and the laws created to help secure the rights of blacks. There were many successes in the process of advancing the cause of the Civil Rights Movement during this time period. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was proposed by JFK and later made a reality by Lyndon B. Johnson. It ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was signed by Lyndon B. Johnson and aimed to defeat legal problems at the state and local levels that prevented African Americans from exercising their right to vote under the 15th Amendment. Before the 24th Amendment was ratified to the Constitution on January 23, 1969, citizens in some states were forced to pay a poll tax to vote. The 24th Amendment completely got rid of this fee and drew more voters to vote in national elections. In 1958, the Loving v. Virginia case was brought to the court when a white man named Richard Loving married a black woman named Mildred Jeter. The Virginia couple was charged with violating the state's anti-misegregation statute, which banned interracial marriages. They were found guilty and faced 1 year in jail, but the charges would be dropped if they left Virginia for 25 years. On October 2, 1967, civil rights advocate Thurgood Marshall was appointed by U.S. Court Justice. He was the first African American to sit in America's highest court. This step in history allowed for more equal outcomes of court hearings and seemed to give the minorities a voice in Congress. The Civil Rights Act of 1968 was very important in the subject of racial violence. It specifically addressed penalties for certain acts of violence towards African Americans. Affirmative action is the process of taking steps to help present women and minorities in areas where they were normally discriminated against in. It passed in 1965 with the goal of creating equality in the workforce in colleges for both men and women of all races and those with disabilities. Many cases passed that were related to affirmative action dealt with the education system. In UC Regents v. Bake, the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional for colleges to accept students based on needing to fulfill racial quotas, but that at times was constitutional to accept more applicants that were minorities. In the case Gratz v. Bollinger, the Supreme Court pushed for diversity in colleges but felt that most were going about it in the wrong way. As a result, the University of Michigan, a system which designed in Schwett v. Coalition to defend affirmative action, the court ruled that state universities cannot consider peace as a part of the application process. Although there were so many steps in the positive direction during this period, there is concern that because of these new laws, standards have been lowered to the accepting of all students. There's also controversial views over whether these systems should be beneficial to students who need financial aid. Many people argued over the fact that we should set higher expectations for colleges to improve our education system. Overall, the legacy of the Civil Rights Movement was possible because of the positive outcomes in court, the representation of home minorities, and the equality given to all races regarding college and the workforce.